Welcome back to the Google Ads Lead Gen Show. My name is Michelle Kop from Level 28 Media.
And my name is Dean Hua with Sachi Studio.
And for today's show, we are going to be doing a deep dive into B2B campaign strategies for Google Ads. So if you are looking to run one, or you're already running a B2B campaign and you're looking for some insider tips and tricks on how to further optimize or set your campaign up for success, this is definitely a show that you would really want to pay attention to and watch all the way until the very end. So let's go ahead and get started here. So Dean, I want to start with just asking you, why should the strategy for a B2B campaign be different than a strategy for B2C?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. I'll try to distill this in the most simplest way for people to understand. Number one, when you're dealing with B2B, you're dealing with longer sales cycles versus B2C, which is a very short sales cycle. That into itself requires you to approach Google advertising differently. And then just in terms of keyword mix and volume, it's totally different. In fact, there's a lot of niches when you're trying to do B2B. You do attract B2C search queries, which obviously will not add to the bottom line. It just simply makes Google advertising more expensive. So you have to adjust for that tactic as well. Given those two dynamics, you need to treat B2B advertising on Google completely different than B2C. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Awesome. And
You?
something else I wanted to jump in and mention with B2B, the decision makers are going to be very, very different from what you would find in B2C. Because when we are dealing with B2B, you may not necessarily be just targeting the business owner. It could also be the VP of operations, the director of operations. Like everyone at a specific company is going to have a different title. So then that, sometimes becomes a little bit more challenging. And then sometimes these people, they need to have conversations with others in order to make a decision on whatever they're looking for. So this aligns with what you were saying, Dean, with the longer sales cycle. And I think something that we also want to make very clear here is because of the longer sales cycle, there should be more of a full funnel approach to this rather than just expecting that, oh, you can just generate a phone call or a form submission right away. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some nurturing. So having, different types of campaigns, whether it's like awareness campaigns or consideration campaigns in place, or remarketing campaigns to re-engage people and not just expect that just when someone sees the ads, they're going to call or they're going to submit the form. That's not necessarily the case that you would find with B2B. And on top of that, you also have to think about the offer, and we'll probably do a little bit more of a deep dive too, but someone sees your ad, they might not be ready to quote unquote contact you yet. Just like, in B2C, a lot of times we're trying to get consumers to call the client directly or submit a form. But in this case, with B2B, we could also be, instead of, asking for that really low hanging, that opportunity to like talk to them or set up a meeting or booked call, maybe it's downloading a PDF or some other type of, value add thing. We can talk about that in a bit. So that's what I wanted to add on that. Anything else from you?
No, I think that's it. So do we want to talk about how do we approach the sales cycle when it's pretty long and like
Yeah.
how we tackle a funnel?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I'll just start off first with like just giving my ideas. So obviously every product or service has a different sales cycle within B2B. I'm used to dealing with anywhere from 3 to 9 month sales cycles with B2B lead gen. And I always tackle high intent leads first. This is your typical landing page. Either fill out a form or booking a calendar or a phone call. Right, those are your three primary call to actions. I think one of the pitfalls or traps that a lot of agencies and advertisers make here is they pigeonhole their prospects into one CTA. So actually, I just had a conversation with a client of mine, B2B. They sell software, but it's a relatively new software that people are unaware of. So because people don't know that the solution exists out there for this type of software, they don't necessarily know what they're searching for. So initially what we were doing was the CTA was to book a calendar meeting, but that proved the wrong way of doing things, because what ended up happening is that the sales rep was getting a lot of no-shows. And plus we were getting a lot of B2C inquiries where people had Gmail addresses or Yahoo addresses rather than a corporate email address. So one of the things I'm suggesting, and I'm sure they'll implement, is to get rid of the booking calendar and just replace it with a contact form. Allow people to just make an inquiry into the contact via the contact form and just see what sort of inquiries people are getting. Because right now, if we're using a booking calendar and people aren't even showing up, we don't even know what their real needs are. So by replacing the booking calendar with a contact form, we at least get some market research, and using that market research, we can help refine our messaging and maybe do a pivot into a different industry if a generic approach isn't working for us. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do within the B2B sales cycle. In terms of top of the funnel or middle of the funnel, really depends on niche. Again, this just depends on ad budget as well. If we got extra money left over, absolutely, I'm up for experimenting with top of the funnel or middle of the funnel. I think the challenge here is you don't necessarily always want to use a booking calendar or a contact form as your CTA. Maybe the purpose here is just to get them to download
A
a
PDF.
PDF, right? Opt in with your email address and so on and so forth, and see what the funnel looks like and what the pipeline looks like for that. But that's kind of how I approach things.
Awesome. What I really want to touch on here is, I'm sure that you've seen that triangle, right? Where it talks about like awareness, consideration, and then actual like purchase intent or making that decision at the very bottom. So that's really what, with B2B, if we have the budget, you need to be allocating your budget in the specific areas. But if you're more limited on the budget, then you only want to focus on those higher intent keywords there, and then from there you can build on top of it. So we talked about different types of call to actions. You may not be able to just like expect someone to submit a form right away to get a book appointment, but maybe you could offer them some type of soft CTA call to action to maybe download an ebook or some type of PDFs. I know HubSpot does a really amazing job with a ton of content that they create. They probably have a library of hundreds of, different pieces of content. And they run ads to get people to download these pieces of content. And then from there, they have a drip campaign so that they can nurture these leads, because as we talked about, it can take a really, really long time to ultimately convert, different decision makers to actually work with you. And on top of that, a lot of these decision makers, they're going to be shopping around too. You're not going to be the only one that they're talking to. So we really have to consider that. Yeah, so I wanted to just quickly talk about competitor or conquesting campaigns, 'cause I know that's really popular within B2B Google Ads campaigns, if you have a sufficient budget. So Dean, do you want to touch on that? Touch on your experience, and I'll share mine.
Yeah, so conquesting campaigns, if I'm understanding you correctly, are basically bidding on the brand terms of your competitors.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't ever call it conquesting. So this is extremely hit or miss. It's pretty easy to do. I mean, you simply just bid on your competitors. But there's a couple caveats to this. Number one, you may end up getting a lot of accidental traffic. Like, I don't know, let's just say you're in the CRM space and your competitor is Salesforce. So you want to compete on Salesforce CRM, right? Well, that's all fine and dandy, but if people are clicking on your ad, going to your web page, they may think that you're Salesforce, which obviously isn't the sort of traffic you're looking for. Number two, you also want to be careful of you want to be careful to not bid on trademarked terms, because some of these companies have their brand trademark. So if you're not careful with that, you'll probably get a cease and desist letter. Again, not a big issue as long as you stop doing it, but you may get a legal letter from their legal department. Number 3, there is some value to conquesting terms or bidding on your brand terms, or bidding on your competitors' brand terms. Primarily, people who are doing a search for other competitors, that means that signals that they're in the market for the product or service. So there could be some relevant click traffic there, but what you need to be careful of is just because they click on your ad and they go to your website, they may not convert right then and there. What may end up happening is they may have the reaction, oh, okay, I didn't know these guys existed. Let me just bookmark them and come back to them, weeks, months down the road after I keep doing my research. So from my perspective, that's what you need to know about conquesting or bidding on your competitors' brand terms.
Awesome. And to touch on that too, I'd say that, if you're going to be doing a conquesting campaign, I would I wouldn't make it a huge priority from the outside of gate. You always want to cover your bases with your general non-brand terms, the high intent keywords, and then your branded terms, and then move into your competitor campaigns if that's something that you want to focus on. But I wouldn't just go after your competitor terms blindly. You really want to make sure that you're honing in on very specific high intent competitor terms, and even have some type of landing page that you can use to sway people once they get to your landing page. So let's say, using an example of you're an accounting software like Sage accounting software, and you're trying to convince someone that's, using QuickBooks or looking for QuickBooks to convert to you. Well, a really great tactic that a lot of SaaS platforms do is they have a page that compare, their SaaS platform to other ones to show why they're more valuable. So I'm sure you've seen those comparison charts with
Yeah.
like the check marks of the benefits and stuff like that. So if you're going to do it, that's probably a better method than just driving them to your main website. And then another thing too is you need to pay attention to your negative keywords. You want to make sure that you're blocking out things like support, any types of keyword like login or something like that that indicate that this user is looking to actually go to your competitor's website to like actually, log in or like deal with their customer support. A very good tactic that I've used that I've seen work really well is like cancellation keywords. So if you're in the SaaS space, and you are bidding on, let's say, cancel QuickBooks, cancel QBO, then you know that this person is like ready to like be done with them. So then you can swoop in and create that awareness about you. And I think with conquesting or competitor campaigns, it's a really great awareness play, because they're looking for a competitor. They already are aware of your competitor, and you just want to show them that, hey, I'm also here too, and I also have value, and this is why I'm better than them. So that's also a really good B2B campaign strategy and approach. Oh, another thing, bidding on your competitors is going to be more expensive, just in general. So be aware of that too. Since you don't own that brand name, it's just something you're going to be having to pay a premium for. So keep that in mind as well. So let's go ahead and dive into audiences. So Dean, have you what type of audience strategies do you tend to use when it comes to B2B campaigns?
So with the clients that I deal with, we don't do a lot of modification on audiences. For example, I know if you link up your Google Ads or your Google Analytics, you can start segmenting by certain audiences.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you may want to penetrate people who are affiliated with IT, information technology, or home and gardening, or some of these affinity buckets, if you will. I've had clients ask me about that, but it's very hit or miss because at least with the campaigns I deal with, if we start tapping into these really niche audiences, we may not get enough volume whatsoever. So it's a very nuanced approach that I've never had to deal with. What about yourself? Like, have you had to do any of that?
Yes. So an approach that I have used in the past is using first party data. So, if you're a client or if you have a list of, let's say, at least 1,000, I'd say at least 2,000, because Google says you have to have at least 1,000 to even serve to an audience. But what happens is if you just upload a list of 1,000, their match rate's going to be probably, lower. So then you're not going to be able to like meet that minimum. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is because you can leverage something called Google Customer Match. So that, if you want to use some type of approach where you're creating lookalikes, or you want to create, essentially a campaign where you're targeting your existing customers, whether you're trying to upsell them into something, or sway them to do something, then I think using this type of customer match approach is really good. So leveraging the first party data, and then another approach with audiences as well is look at your demographics, because if your ideal audience, or target, ideal customer persona is not in that, let's say 18 to 25-year-old range, or 18 to 24, or 65 plus, you're probably going to be wasting your money in that area. So it might be a good idea to potentially block that out, or you can let it run and make adjustments, based off of that. But it's just a quick way out of the gate to know, like, hey, I don't want to be spending money on, this type of, audience, because it's not my ideal audience as well. Google has added in some interesting, like, intent based audiences, like in market for software, in market for accounting services, in market for marketing. You can add those in an observation mode, so you can monitor how they do, based off of the performance. Then you can make adjustments, but I wouldn't just target that audience, because you'd be severely limiting yourself. So keep that in mind. I think that they're good things to add onto your campaigns, but you wouldn't want to like do a target and bid and just target directly on that campaign until you start seeing like the results. You might just want to put it in observation mode. Any other thoughts or comments?
No, no, I think that pretty much sums it up for audience marketing. Um, let's talk about like how do we pre-qualify traffic? Because like I said earlier in the video, whenever you're doing B2B, you're always bound to get some B2C traffic, as well as just junk leads. So I'll start off, and you
Yeah.
feel free to chime in. How do we avoid B2C traffic, or at least how do we minimize it? So number one, I don't think you can ever truly avoid it, but you can certainly reduce the cost associated with B2C traffic using a few techniques. Number one, I'll just give you some examples just to kind of get the creative juices flowing. Let's just say you're a manufacturer, and regardless of the widgets that you sell, you only sell to B2B. You don't sell to B2C. And you may end up finding you're getting a lot of inquiries for people trying to order individual units, whereas you sell in bulk, right? So this is pretty typical within wholesaling.
Mm-hmm.
What you could do with your ad copy,
Mm-hmm.
like your Google ad copy, is to simply say, oh, bulk wholesaling, or minimum units is 300, or whatever the minimum is, right? And then on the landing page itself, again, to pre-qualify some of this traffic, you could sit there and say, hey, again, we do bulk wholesaling, or we require a certain minimum of order. That way you don't get these individual orders from people. So that's one way. Another way is just looking at your search queries and trying to see which ones are associated with B2C.
Mm-hmm.
This varies from niche to niche. But that's another way of doing it as well. Like, how do you pre-qualify B2C traffic?
I think you took the words out of my mouth in terms of making sure that it's clear in your ad copy, what you have to offer, and so that you could remove, or sway away people that are not, ideal for you, that are in that B2C audience. Um, I think it's I think touching on something that you didn't like dived a little bit deeper into has to do with the specific keyword set. So I've worked with accounting firms, let's say, just throwing out an example. It's a financial services firm, but they only work, it's just B2B. But as you can imagine, there could be some B2C customers like me during tax season doing a search, and I'm looking for, an accountant to help. Well, number one, making sure that it's, very clear in your ads that you do serve like only like specific, these specific industries, or that you serve specific businesses. And also looking at the specific keyword set and making sure that the keyword set is very defined. And, right now it's a little bit complicated because of the way that the specific keywords with like phrase match and exact match not really being phrase match and exact match. So having
Yeah.
strong negative keywords in place. So, let's say accounting services for small business, accounting services for, or financial services for, like commercial, like, so very specific keywords to that versus just accounting services or bookkeeping services. Like you really want to like tighten up that intent, because if you just keep it to bookkeeping services, I have no idea whether you're, just a general person looking to file, or looking just to do your bookkeeping. Just, well, actually, typically, businesses would be doing bookkeeping, not, individuals. But I think you know where I'm going with this. So like if you're like
Yeah,
a tax
actually,
advisor or something like that, do you have any comments on that?
yeah, I mean, it's funny you just mentioned accounting. I've got a Zoom call tomorrow with a CPA client or prospect, actually, I should say. He wants to engage in Google advertising, and
Nice.
in the contact form, he said, "I want to do CPA or accounting services for certain industries."
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have that conversation because
Mm-hmm.
there's a clear, having done Google advertising for CPA before. There's a real big difference in lead quality when someone does a search for CPA near me versus
Mm-hmm.
CPA plus the industry that he wants to penetrate. Because
Exactly. Yeah.
if you bid on CPA near me or CPA in XYZ city,
It's
you're probably going to get a
B2C.
lot of people inquiring about like text prep or text
Yeah,
planning.
exactly.
And if you know anything about CPAs, at least those who've been around for a while, they don't want to deal with that nonsense.
No,
They'd
they
rather
want
deal
the
with
bigger
B2B.
ticket.
Yeah, they want
Yeah.
bigger ticket stuff. So we'll have
Yeah.
that conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something else, I work with a lot of locksmiths, and they make a lot of money, from doing commercial jobs. However, when someone types in locksmith, we have no idea if they're B2C or they're just a general consumer, or they're, commercial. So going after keywords like commercial locksmith, business locksmith, that's going to be like more honed in on the audience of like B2B. But, just the keyword locksmith, that could go either way. And I wanted to bring up a very interesting quick anecdote. I had a friend, she started working for a company that does commercial landscaping. And she pretty much asked me, can you help me do Google ads? But I do not want to get any residential leads. So I did some research. The problem is, in general, a lot of the audience are not searching commercial landscaping. They're looking for landscaping. And the problem with landscaping is it's going to attract a ton of B2C. And she told me that she doesn't want any of that. And I said, there's no way to fully block that out. So if you don't even, if you're going to get mad that you're going to get some B2C and you're going to want to shut it off after like a month without giving it time, let's just not even, work
Yeah.
together. So I wanted to ask, is there any way, like, what type of approach would you use if, for this type of campaign? Because that's where it gets tricky. There's not a lot of volume looking for business landscaping or commercial landscaping, because the general market or those people are just going to be typing in landscaping, for, on Google ads. So would there be a different approach for you besides,
Um,
having very specific ads to it? But the keywords are what's really going to be the key too.
yeah, for these sort of situations where the volume isn't there for commercial or B2B stuff, I tell my client very bluntly, don't do Google
Don't do it.
advertising.
Yeah.
There are other ways of generating, because basically the analogy I give people is when you're doing Google advertising, you're tapping into demand,
Yeah.
right? You're tapping into demand, meaning um, consumers know that the service exists and they're going to do a Google search for that service. So you're tapping into demand. What she's trying to do is create demand or generate demand. So in that case, Google advertising as a platform isn't great you want to do other stuff. What that is, it could be anything. It could be from
LinkedIn, Facebook.
podcast outreach, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
Facebook ads. Actually, Facebook ads do work very well for commercial or B2B, depending on the niche. But I have to be very honest with them and let them know that Google advertising isn't the appropriate platform.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what I told my friend, and and she just was totally, fine with that, was appreciative that I was very upfront saying there's no way to fully block it out, because the most volume you're going to get is just from the keyword landscaping, or, landscapers. But that's just it's going to be a toss up, and probably 80% of that's going to be residential and not commercial. So
Yeah.
if you got a very limited budget, it's definitely not the place to be. Um, any other comments that you want to make on that, or you want to jump into the next topic?
Another thing in my notes here is contact form optimization as a way to pre-qualify B2B and B2C traffic. So one of the biggest challenges that people make with contact forms is, and rightfully so, they're trying to collect a lot of information through the contact form. Let's say hypothetically you're trying to collect 10 fields of data beyond, first name, last name, phone number, email. Well, a lot of data has shown that the more fields you require within your contact form, your conversion rates tend to drop precipitously.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a couple of methods, or one specific method you can use to pre-qualify traffic while maintaining your conversion rates, and that's called multi-step forms. If you don't know what multi-step forms are, this is basically what's that software that's really good at multi-step? I know you know what I'm talking about, but if you can't remember, like I would tell people, do a search for Home Advisor plus HVAC.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And if you do a search, you land on the landing page, you'll see what a multi-step form is. But basically what it does is, instead of presenting all of the fields all at once for the prospect to fill out,
Bite
it
size.
certainly it just asks for you to fill out one field at a time. So you fill out your first name, your last name, hit next. You're presented with the next field to fill out, hit next, and so on and so forth. What this does, it maintains, or in some situations, it increases your conversion rate, because people don't feel like they're overloaded with a lot of information that they have to fill out. To give you an offline analogy, it's like going to the doctor's office for the first time, and this new doctor, they give you an intake form. A lot of us hate filling out intake forms because it's usually 4 pages of data that you have to fill out. So, imagine that feeling you have with filling out a doctor's intake form and applying that to the digital format here. So if the doctor can somehow use a multi-step form, which I don't think they can, but if there's a way to do that, that's how I would do it when it comes to pre-qualifying traffic while maintaining your conversion rates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm fully aligned with that. How about chatbots and putting that on your landing page? Any experience for like B2B using chatbots?
Just had this conversation this morning with a B2B client of mine. We are exploring the idea of having chatbots. I think I don't think there's anything wrong with having chatbots as a way to help automate some of the sales process. I do believe somewhere along the way with the chatbot, you need a human being to intervene, because the majority of us hate dealing with this sort of automation where a lot of times artificial intelligence, quite frankly, just isn't there yet. It's not there yet where it can anticipate or answer the questions that we have. And that's a very frustrating experience. So if you do choose to implement chatbots, just be aware that you should have a human being on the other end that's ready to intervene.
I was on a support chat with it was with the chat bot, and I kept asking it a question, and it kept giving me articles it wanted me to read instead of talking to someone live, and it was so frustrating because I kept asking it a question, and clearly they didn't have a support article to answer that question for me, and I was like, did we answer your question? No, 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 you didn't.
Yeah.
And then finally, after 2-3 minutes, it was like, would you like to talk to someone? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted. So I think that, that makes perfect sense. And going back to what you were talking about with like the forms and stuff like that, it's kind of interesting because we have talked about the tug of war between, having, a short form and then, having to deal with a huge quantity of leads versus a long form and, having, a small number of leads. So finding that happy medium, it really just depends on what your organization can support. Some organizations have enough salespeople to weed through it. Some don't. I have a client that I was telling him for a while, like you need to shorten your application form, your contact form. But it really is really more like an application, just like what you were talking about, like when you go to a doctor's office and there's an intake. That's pretty much what he's asking people to fill out, even before setting up a sales call. So he does a lot of pre-qualifying because he's very particular and doesn't want to waste time on these tire kickers or people that cannot even afford his services. So that's why he puts the services up front with the pricing. So at least people are aware of that. And then he makes them fill out a long form to even contact them. And most of the time, there's a lot of people that leave. And I made that very clear. He's paying a lot of money per click, probably like $30 a click, but he doesn't mind because his customer lifetime value is that high. This is a bookkeeping firm for contractors, by the way.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah. Anything else that you wanted to touch on that?
Nope. Let's move on.
Okay.
So how do we, when it comes to Google advertising for B2B, how do we improve lead quality? You want to like give your first thoughts and I'll piggyback?
Yeah, so improving lead quality, so making sure that you have a CRM. I mean, it just depends on the size of your organization, right? But a lot of the B2B organizations that I worked with for Google Ads do have CRM systems so that when leads come in, they're tagged so that we know that they're, tagged for Google Ads. And then from there, we can follow along the journey to see how good of how good quality of those leads they are. Besides just saying, oh, I got you 15 leads this month. Well, we need to see the quality and we need to pass back that data to Google so that we can further optimize and continue to get you, better quality. So having a CRM integration and also just monitoring what's actually happening and what's actually closing. But also, keeping in mind that, again, this can take a really long time and it could take 6 to 9 months or even more, depending on the industry, to actually close. And then having some type of call tracking software so that you can listen in on the phone calls if you do accept phone calls, because some B2B organizations don't. But listening in and seeing and vetting the quality that's coming through. Anything that you want to add?
Yeah, so let me touch on the importance of a CRM when it comes to B2B advertising on Google Ads, because I actually just had a conversation about this with a B2B client. I mean, we sit here and we preach about the importance of having a CRM and tracking and all that good stuff, but what people don't realize, even with B2B companies with decent budgets, their marketing departments a lot of times are just they're undermanned, and
Mm-hmm.
so many other things get in the way of having them use a proper CRM. I'll give you an exact situation of a client of mine, B2B niche, primarily software and marketing services, and they just implemented HubSpot, which is a pretty good
Mm-hmm.
CRM platform. However, they don't have a contractor on board that can implement dashboards and do proper conversion tracking. Just because the marketing manager that I report to, he's understaffed right now. He's doing so many things. He's working a lot of hours that this is not a priority. And this actually makes the Google advertising suffer, because what ends up happening is I actually am generating a sufficient number of conversions on a monthly basis. But because I'm not getting feedback on the pipeline, which a CRM can do, I have no clue as to what the leads look like. Are
You
they
can't really optimize much besides just optimizing towards volume.
Yeah, I mean, are these decent leads or are they complete trash? And we've tried to do workarounds until he could find a HubSpot contractor. Like, one of the things that we're doing is I took the initiative just to implement a real quick CRM within a Google Sheets
Mm-hmm.
dashboard. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
implement a CRM dashboard within Google Sheets that basically just tracks name, when they convert
Mm-hmm.
it, in the pipeline. But now a new issue that we're running into is he needs someone to go into the Google Sheets and fill
Mm-hmm.
out the contact data. And so it usually takes this person a month just to do this for me, if even,
Yeah.
because this is not her wheelhouse. She doesn't know anything about this stuff. And so because of that, my performance suffers as well. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
symbiotic relationship between the Google advertising agency and the B2B client as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, like I said, we just had this conversation. They finally found a HubSpot contractor, and they're going to be working on this over the next several weeks. But that's the importance of having a proper CRM and having people who are staffed correctly to input the data and respond back to the agency at large.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this episode. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you.
Right, later.